Ashley. I chose to interview my father for my life story presentation. Initially, I utilized the biopsychosocial perspective in order to gather information about the interviewee's demographics. So he's a 59-year-old Polish-Italian male. He was born in a suburb of Buffalo, New York, and grew up with 5 brothers. He's a veteran of the United States Air Force, has 4 children, is divorced, and currently disabled. Next, I wanted to assess childhood. And through the assessment, I wanted to determine advantages and disadvantages that he faced. So disadvantages include that he grew up in poverty. Throughout his childhood, his family struggled financially, I'd say until he was in his late teenage years. Alcoholism, there was a pattern of alcoholism throughout his family. His father was a severe alcoholic who ultimately died due to alcoholism when the interviewee was 10 years old. And also the interviewee endured physical discipline. Some advantages include his basic needs were fulfilled. So he had food, clothing, and shelter. He was close with his siblings, and he had a strong maternal figure. He speaks of his mother in such high regard. He has a large extended family, and his stepfather was very important to him growing up, and even into adulthood. He was just a great father figure for him. So next, I had to choose a developmental theory to kind of assess this client or the interviewee. I chose a psychoanalytical approach, and within that approach I had to identify barriers which ultimately would result in defense mechanisms. So barriers that I identified were poverty, repressed emotions, alcoholism, and loss. Defenses that developed as a result of these barriers were denial and rationalization. The interviewee stated that he utilized both, especially while he was struggling with alcoholism in adulthood. Splitting, isolation of affect, sublimation, and humor. So throughout the interview, the interviewee did use humor to kind of lighten subjects. When things seemed to feel difficult, he would kind of resort to humor. And isolation of affect. So he did bottle his emotions growing up. He was forced to kind of struggle through very significant life experiences without being able to communicate and discuss them. So next I wanted to look at how these childhood experiences translated into adulthood. So ultimately, as an adult, he lacked coping skills. So he tended to lean towards, again, alcohol as his primary coping tool, and he continued to bottle his emotions. And his family life was also affected by his childhood. So when he married and had his children, he wanted them to experience a different way of growing up than he did. So he utilized strong communication skills with his kids and even uses them to this day with his older children. He did, however, go through a divorce and ended up in debt, resulting in bankruptcy, which was resolved once the divorce was finalized. A strength that translated from childhood into adulthood is fortitude. So he has a strong work ethic and has his whole life. I think he said he had his first job when he was 10 years old. He's resilient and accepting. No matter what life throws at him, he's really able to kind of roll with the punches and persevere. So then I utilized the strengths perspective. The strengths perspective, I feel like this interviewee has a lot of strengths and has struggled through a lot in his life, and he relies on self-motivation. So I felt like this was kind of a perfect fit. I identified his strengths. His strengths include resiliency, confidence, he's resourceful, he's minimalistic, accepting and pragmatic, he's honest, He's empathetic, he values spirituality and fortitude. Application of strengths and psychoanalytical perspectives. So the interviewee expressed that he doesn't like to focus on the past. He learns from the past and uses it to do better in the future. With that said, the goal that we will be establishing will reflect a present time issue. So at this point, he's struggling with his disability. His disability is resulting in depression, lethargy, lack of motivation, frustration, so a lot of negative feelings. With that said, we kind of wanted to establish the goal. The goal was to reduce the symptoms of depression. So interventions that we could utilize would be, and this would be according to the strengths perspective, would be motivational interviewing and recognition of perseverance. So we want to really pick out and have him pick out the things that he views as strong points within himself and use them to help pull him out of this depressive funk that he's in. Then I would utilize the psychoanalytical approach. So initially we would want to kind of identify defense mechanisms that are present. And I would probably, use schema therapy and cognitive behavioral techniques. But what we really want to do is recognize patterns that have been significant throughout his life. This includes cognitions, behaviors, and affect. And they're just like repetitive themes throughout his life. So ultimately, this experience provided me with a lot of insight as to how childhood affects adulthood, how our childhood experience helped shape us into who we are today. And the interviewee was very receptive and engaged throughout the whole process, which made it, a very easy process to go through. With that said, the use of theoretical approaches really kind of helped guide me through, parts that I found significant and how they could possibly be translated into adulthood. So the whole process has really been insightful and a learning experience. Thank you.